Hello, and welcome to another edition of ESF Connected. Today, I am joined by Rex Jardine. He is our Assistant Director of Facilities Planning, Design, and Construction. Rex, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So, for everybody else, I am Debbie Cavness. I am the Director of Alumni Relations. And we bring you these ESF Connected episodes to try and keep you up to date on what's going on campus. So, today, I am very pleased to tell you that we are having an update on the Marshall Hall renovation. So many of you remember Marshall Hall. It was your home. You took classes there. You had the auditorium. So a lot of our alumni have very fond memories of Marshall Hall, Rex. And I know it's been around for a long time, but I'm not quite sure, when was Marshall Hall actually built, at least the time frame?
It was built in the early 30s. I think the cornerstone was laid in 1931. So I would expect it was completed a couple of years after that.
Okay. And is this the first major renovation on Marshall Hall that's been done?
No, it's not. I think in the 60s, there was a renovation in the late 60s, changed some stairs around, inserted the elevator, put some labs in the basement and other spaces. And that was probably the last major intervention.
Okay. So I know that you have a lot of information to share, and I know our alumni are probably very excited to see some of the things and changes that are going to be taking place. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and I will be back at the end to chat with you some more. Take it away, Rex.
Appreciate the opportunity to present. This is a great project. It was much overdue, I believe. Marshall was studied about 6 or 7 years ago about how it did or didn't meet the needs of the campus. It's home to many of our registrar classrooms. It's home to landscape architecture and environmental studies. And at the time, it was home to a number of labs, the Chestnut Lab and various labs under what used to be Forest Resources Management. The study kind of determined that it really needed to be the home for academics, landscape architecture, and general ed, and that the labs probably were not a great fit. So that study was done 6, 7 years ago, and it was actually 3 years ago I got assigned this, or 3.5 years ago. Very exciting project. The total renovation of Marshall Hall. So it's about 93,000 square feet. And the biggest challenge was that it was to be renovated in one phase, meaning empty. We weren't daunted. We knew we could find homes for everything. Wouldn't be easy. But that was kind of our premise, that we would get best value for the campus if it could be emptied, because there was really no practical way to do it in phases. There's the image we're all used to seeing from Illick Hall. These were the goals. This is a fabulous historic building. It's our second building, second only to Bray Hall. The homes for landscape architecture, environmental studies. The teaching spaces were some of the most criticized on campus. They were crowded, they were difficult to see, difficult to hear. It's our student gathering spaces. Many remember the lounge on the lowest level. Landscape architecture students being there 24/7 when something was due. But also it's an opportunity to introduce, more efficient systems to the building, better insulation, better windows. And one of the biggest things is really ADA accessibility. We are a hilly campus. The climb from down at the west end of campus up through Baker to Yon is quite steep, but just to get from Yon up to the quad is about a 14-foot climb. And then Bray is even further up the hill. So we really had to recognize that ADA and campus accessibility was critical. And Marshall needed to fill its role. It sits on the hill. And the good news is it spans sort of the width of the hill. So we have opportunities to bring entrances in. This is way back in 1930. This actually, the date on the plan was November 3rd, 1930. It shows Marshall as the second building. Shows a proposed science building where Illick would eventually be, a larger greenhouse than what we actually built to the east of Marshall, and athletic fields to the west. Syracuse University had built. We were evolving. This was our second building. This is a great photo provided by Kevin Reynolds from our archives. So the building is well underway. The steel frame is up. Things were done, things were mechanically lifted with jib cranes, et cetera. There's a tower crane built there. And one of the interesting things is that wooden bridge you see, let them bring materials from the Bray Hill right into the building on the second floor. They were pushing wheelbarrows, they were bringing bricks and clay tile and plaster. So it's evidence of how they use the hill to their advantage. So that's a great photo in process. You can actually see the athletic fields in the distance there. It's a beautifully detailed building of the 30s. It was rich with ornament, but it wasn't overly rich. So the public spaces, the auditorium, the arrival points were carefully detailed, typical for the day, with ornamental plaster, arched windows, very, very traditional building materials, but it was a steel frame building with concrete encasement. So very simple, straightforward, but yet it served its purpose. Here's the cornerstone being laid in 1931 by Governor and ESF trustee Alfred E. Smith. There is a time capsule buried in that, we believe. These are some of the beautiful drawings of the spiral stairs. But again, the materials were pretty common for the day. Speed tile, which is a clay tile meant to be directly plastered. Some of the better spaces or the higher visibility spaces had oak trim. Corridors had terrazzo. There were hard maple floors probably through 70% of the building. The granite at the base came from Deer Isle, Maine. Limestone from Indiana. Marble in the lobby came from Belgium, a beautiful black marble, and the more you polished it, the blacker it got. Marble from Italy and Tennessee on the stairs, and some of that's still there. We were respectful where we could be, trying to reuse and retain historic materials. Terrazzo can wear forever. Hard maple floors can be refinished. When we learned that the Deer Isle, Maine granite was used, we tried to use it again because that quarry is still open. So again, it's really being a little bit, sensitive to where we can keep things, but it's really a transformation. So some folks were a little worried that, we'd lose the history, and that's not the case. When you step into Marshall, it will feel very much like it did if you come in from the front doors. But as you look left and right, you're going to see a state-of-the-art academic building that will serve ESF for decades to come. So this is a view from the quad as proposed, and you don't see much has changed, except if you look on the far west end close to Jan, you see a kind of a glass tower there. As part of solving ADA, Marshall really needed to reach the ground. There was a sub-basement level there that really didn't connect to anything. So the architectural team working with us and construction fund proposed a modest addition that would really be just an elevator and a stair tower, but we didn't want, or we were asked not to match the historic building. What was new should look new. So the architects proposed a largely glass tower that would enclose the stair and elevator. So you don't really notice much of a change from Marshall from the front unless you're coming up from Jan. And that becomes pretty dramatic. The site plan, while we would have loved to have done more and pulled the fences further to improve things, we're taking good care of the quad. And one of the key things is that we're connecting the Jan gateway level to the quad. So that zigzag ramp you see is actually a 5% or less slope. So it's an easy grade for someone to walk or push a cart. The steps were reused and the granite was reused, and they're already open. We won't see the zigzag ramp until probably next fall. Some of the parking got lost, but I think for the benefit of students, pedestrians, and anybody pushing a stroller or a wheelchair, having it reach the ground at that important point is really kind of critical. We have 4 buildings that touch each other right there, and it's the only place on campus with Jan, Gateway, Moon, and Marshall all coming together. It's really an important crossroads. The land around Marshall, and there isn't a whole lot of it, a lot of it is to the north, so plantings would be carefully chosen. Trees were retained where they could be, mostly to the east. Parking regularized. We connected sidewalks all the way up the hill behind Marshall. And one of the key things, and it's shown there kind of dashed around it, we actually proposed an alternate for a bridge, a pedestrian bridge, just open to get you to the high ground of Bray, much like the construction bridge that helped them build Marshall. It is a complete renovation, a total gut. So this was actually early in the job. These photos, taking down clay tile walls, taking down stairways. That's the stairway at the west where the addition is going. So it's not renovation light. They've hauled over 9 million pounds of material, some of it to be recycled, some of it to C&D waste from the building. Heavy construction from the 30s is not easy to take down. Here's more shots once it's further along. The one on the right is up on the 3rd floor. I believe that was the landscape architecture offices. You can see where the original walls were down through the floor. On the right, that's just inside, or on the left is just inside the lobby. A lot of what we're trying to do is open up. Marshall has fabulous views. We want to bring in light and make sure that it goes, deep into the building. And also transparency. It wasn't a building that let you know what was going on behind walls very easily. So that was in progress, probably midsummer. This is a little further along. So on the right, that's an example of those maple hardwood floors being refinished. We did a proving ground area in a conference room up on the 3rd floor, and they actually refinished pretty well. We had to take out about 6,000 staples, but in the end, with sanding, it makes a serviceable floor that can go for decades to come. On the left is kind of dramatic. Those steel truss members you see have always been hidden in walls over the auditorium. So the floor those gentlemen are standing on is literally over the auditorium, and the truss they're standing among is what holds it up. So the architects looked at this as a great opportunity to expose the structure. This will become a studio for the upperclassmen in landscape architecture. And it actually becomes very exciting space once all of those clay tile plaster walls are down. You couldn't see through here, and it actually has expansive views in 3 directions. The site plan, while some of the other plans were sort of bleak looking with just hard lines, this is lightly colorized to show the planting extent, all carefully chosen for our climate, many native plants, and ones that will be successful north of Marshall that doesn't see a whole lot of sun facing the quad. There you can see the zigzag ramp, all of that richly planted, and you see a bit of the stair tower addition there to the west. So this is probably the most exciting view, because this is where most folks will first get their impressions of Marshall coming up the hill. So this is from Gateway looking at it. So again, while the rendering may look a little bleak because it doesn't show the plantings, this was to feature the architecture. So we have a stair tower that's glass encased all the way up, an elevator within that, a very simple shape, and we use that same Deer Isle granite at the base. So it should be a very close match, but sort of reimagined in modern detail. The curtain wall, clear. The views should be fabulous, as you'll see later, into Oakwood Cemetery, across our campus, across Hendricks Field, down toward the city. And again, I spoke of the rich planting. I believe the landscape architect who's leading the project is an ESF grad. So again, nearly every square foot of the open area is not intended to necessarily be mowed, that it would be densely planted with, sort of a variegated range of plant species, woody shrubs, specimen trees, all planted intentionally where they can grow and thrive. This is a rendering of the east end with that pedestrian bridge. Very simple, just a way that literally connects the 2nd floor of Marshall to the high ground at Bray. It was exciting to bring a new contractor onto campus. The Pike companies out of Rochester were our low bidder. We were thrilled because their bid and 2 of the 5 bids were all well within our budget. Pike brings some specialty contractors, and this one in particular had some skills we had never seen. So I went to work at 8 8:30 in the morning on the 18th and snapped a photo because there was some new equipment there. When I came out at 5 p.m., they were putting everything away, and basically that strip of the building had been taken out in a day. So it was a long-arm demolition saw, long-armed demolition machine, took it down in literally less than a day. So that was sort of amazing turnaround of what modern technology can do in construction. The same firm actually had robotic demolition equipment. While they couldn't use it on the upper floors, they were able to use it pretty successfully in the basement. So these were two of the three machines that maneuvered around the basement. The operator had a remote control with a joystick, and these machines would knock down walls, chew up steel members, door frames, whatever they needed to do. So they made quick work of the basement. You're basically about where the Treehouse Cafe was. And again, when the contractor was done, there was literally nothing much standing except columns, beams, exterior walls, and a few historic features. Love to walk you through the floor plans. This is the lowest levels. We won't get deep in the weeds here, but the sub-basement level over on the lower left has always really just been shops. It used to originally be a garage and delivery point when Marshall had a library at that end. So beyond things like the generator and the meter room and the boiler, we've put bicycle storage indoors. We've done changing rooms and bathrooms and showers. Our students often have to stay late, or our athletic teams may find use of it. Students who have to bring hard hats or work boots need a place they can put them. So we tricked it out. It wasn't great space. It wasn't high ceiling, but we got a lot more use out of it, and we think our students will benefit. So that's going to be the busy entry point, where you either decide to get on the elevator or walk up the steps. Up above it is the main basement level. Almost hate calling it a basement because as you head to the west, it actually has windows with full views. But as you head to the east, it's a little bit more buried in the hill. So on the west end, we actually have graduate students under the environmental studies, the JEEPS program. I think there's room for 56 or so in what are really great communal spaces. Slightly to the right of that is where the Treehouse Cafe was. Our students really truly need a recreation space. So basically we created a multi-purpose space that they can define, whether it's ping pong and foosball or gaming or watching a movie on a big screen TV. Let our students decide how it gets used and let them have it 24/7. There are meeting rooms and recycling and toilets, et cetera, on the floor. The gray areas are storage. One of the more memorable spaces is the basement, previously known as Nifkin. It was a large open area, but yet it had columns. So it was interesting to see it used. There would often be large events that used the whole space. There would be student movie night that pointed a projector at a screen. And at the perimeter, the students typically had lounge space. So again, the perimeter, we're retaining lounge space. At the center, it's one of the few large column-free spaces. We've actually created what can be a classroom by day or event room in the evenings as reserved. It seats about 80, could probably seat more without the tables. We turn the teaching wall around so it faces north rather than blocking the fabulous stained glass window that's at the south. And if there's ever an event that needs the entire space, the walls can be folded back and opened up so that the entire space under the auditorium can be used. Going up a floor, this is the main historic level, or the main lobby level. The one entry we did not change was the quad entry. While we would have loved to have solved ADA there with wheelchair ramps, there would have been ramps and ramps and ramps, because you come up a number of steps into tiers at the front, you come up more steps inside, and more steps again to get to the auditorium. So every other entry to Marshall is wheelchair accessible all the way around, with the exception of the historic one. It was too big of an intervention to try to create an entry there. We did improve things. We created wider doors, deeper vestibules, One of the things Marshall was missing was a place for students to decompress along the way. There's really was a double loaded corridor with classrooms on either sides or offices, and there's really no place to step away. So one of the hallmarks the architects worked in was to make sure that there were adequate informal lounges and formal, so that if you're waiting for someone, if you started a conversation and you needed a place to carry it on. So even flanking the entry, they've created some little L-shaped lounges so that you can wait for someone, cram just before a test. But this is some of our biggest classroom spaces. So flanking the entry where there were previously offices, we have two fairly large classrooms. The auditorium is kind of a case study by itself. While it sat over 300 people in the day, some of those seats were literally facing the wall, shoulder to shoulder, with a masonite board to write on. We knew it wasn't the highest and best use for the auditorium, that packing 300 or more people in there really wasn't the right move. Our administration let us be a little creative, and our architects led us to a better place, we think. It had a sloped floor. The front half of the room, we are putting in traditional auditorium style seating, but with great tablet arms that swing up. Electricity to every student position seated in the front to keep laptops charged. But at the back half of the room, we actually flattened the floor so that it could actually be kind of a creative academic space. At the back half, we envisioned there would be tables for two for most classes so that you could fill the front and the back half. But if you ever had an after hours event, a catered event, a speaker, you could do other things in the back. You could do all chairs. If you had a lecture, you could do tables and chairs for an event. You could do tables for food. The stage grew a bit. So it's going to be a fabulous transformation of the auditorium. Actually, Syracuse University is a little bit jealous. They've been trying to do this. The two signature departments find their homes on this floor. Landscape architecture to the northwest, kind of looking over towards Moon, and environmental studies to the northeast, looking over the quad up towards Bray. Two of the signature feature things for these departments, landscape architecture ends up with a gallery space that they can actually entice, nationally recognized exhibits because they can place them and at the end of the day be able to lock the door. And digital storytelling, which was created through environmental studies, will actually have a home on the prominent first floor. Most of the other spaces, smaller conference rooms, larger seminar rooms interspersed, they're typically shown in purple. And we're actually hoping to restore one set of Marshall original furniture to put in one of these rooms. We've been hanging on to tables, chairs, and a few other things that came from Marshall we'd probably have refinished. So that's the most public floor. We went the extra effort to make that east entry ADA accessible. It required quite a long ramp, but in the end, we were able to do it by just a fraction of an inch to get all the clearances. Another hallmark of Marshall is we have single occupant toilets on every room, or every floor, I'm sorry. This particular floor has the traditional men's and women's rooms because when you empty classes or have class change, a lot of folks are dashing towards bathrooms, but other floors typically have a number of single occupant toilets. We did have to flip digital storytelling in the gallery. This was a better fit. So that's a blow up of that sort of southwest corner. Gives you a sense of how those lay out. The gallery will have big swinging wall panels so that they can hang artwork and exhibits on various surfaces. So that was one of the few changes late in the game just before we went out to bid. Moving our way up, I think this was a home run when these departments looked at how many offices they need and right sized. It actually worked out that practically all of the offices for these two departments and general education, which has since spun off as a separate division, actually fit on the second floor. So the approach was that full-time faculty would get a SUNY standard office of about 120 square feet. They would be at the perimeter. They would have the large windows. One of the things our architects did, and I think it was a huge win was they actually built in the bookcases, because it's difficult to buy a commercial bookcase, whereas if you build one in, it can be taller and more robust. We do have a lot of faculty with a great library, personal library they bring. And they would be simply furnished, to accommodate one or two guests or a student who may come to, advise or have questions. At the core, they created a second corridor, basically, so offices could be right size. Right down the spine of the building, we have shared offices for two. Our visiting instructors are typically in shared offices, and this seemed like the right mix. But you also see a sprinkling of the purple spaces. Those belong to no one in particular. They belong to everyone. So our students have places to congregate, meet with a professor if it's just before a midterm and 5 or 6 of them have questions. The instructor can go over and grab a room and say, let's go here and I'll explain it. So all of those purple rooms are either what we call huddles or nooks, places to step aside, to talk or chat with someone. And what had once been the balcony looking into the Marshall Auditorium becomes the most fabulous conference room probably in the building. It has some glass into the auditorium, and really it's probably a better use of that space. The third floor is where landscape architecture really gets to spread their wings. They were on every floor before, first, second, third, and fourth, with studios all disconnected. The architects saw kind of a unique opportunity to open up the north side, and it actually worked out beautifully that they were able to do just 2 major studio spaces. The one at the top of the page spans the entire north exposure. I think it's almost 80 yards long, with north light, expansive views, and that's probably the undergraduate studios, first, second, third year, maybe fourth. The south portion of the building over the auditorium is probably the upperclassmen. Again, another studio space that's spectacular with views on 3 sides. And now studios can be vertical, they can be mixed. Freshmen will interact with, upperclassmen, see what the other ones are doing. And again, a lot of the social spaces that may have been buried in a studio are now brought forward, so that the lounge space on that floor is kind of at the crossroads there. We'll show you some images. We actually have 5 classrooms up on this level. Landscape architecture often will go to a room to, have a presentation during the studio hours in the afternoon. And the cohorts in landscape architecture are typically groups of 15 or a double cohort of 30. So we created 5 classrooms up here that actually can serve the registrar for classes in the mornings, and landscape architecture would probably have preferential use of them in the afternoons. The 4th floor, you don't even really realize is there, because it's in the roof. Windows are fairly limited. 4th floor has always been occupied with different functions. So knowing that there's an elevator at the west end brings you in. A lot of visitors will arrive from that end. So some of the signature spaces are sort of right as you get off the elevator and enter the 4th floor. You're literally walking through a dormer in the roof. So they have to cut through there still. So we have some of our Discovery Challenge spaces, one for LA on the right, one for environmental studies on the left. And this whole 4th floor is really the specialty spaces that support these 2 departments. So for environmental studies, it's big data. For architecture, it's 2D and 3D output, model making shops, CNC routers, 3D printers. A lot of that's shown in the chartreuse color. The center space there is the what's always been their jury crit room, their presentation room. So it's opened up. We've actually put skylights back. The original skylights of Marshall, many of them were roofed over. So we're actually putting skylights back over the jury crit room, over the 3rd floor south studio. So this was kind of a home run of all the specialty spaces that support environmental studies and landscape architecture. The research center's in blue. There's 7 offices up here. They've always been there. They were actually right-sized before, but they're kind of reconstructed, a lot more openness and glass so that light spills into corridors. And even up on this fourth floor where there's quite a bit packed in, they did work in some little nooks that would basically be social spaces. One of the interesting things is the stair tower addition. There's a tiny bit of space left over at the far west end. And because of the way they turn the elevator facing north, it actually becomes a little informal lounge, kind of a bonus space, but it's a bonus space on every floor with fabulous views. You'll see that at the very end. So here are some of the images. This would be the entry to the basement level. It was kind of, it was a solid roof. It hung low. There was always leaves swirling in the vestibule or just inside. So it opens it up, a lot more transparency, a glass roof, glass entry, and an actual vestibule. So we save some energy. To the left is the recycling door. This is an image of the lower level, the lounge that surrounds the one classroom we spoke of earlier. The panel walls that are mostly glass can be folded back if we ever had an entire event. So this is lounge space that the students have use of pretty much all the time, whereas before for events it was taken away from them. This is that classroom that got turned around at the basement level, so you can actually see the stained glass window that's at the south and the teaching walls at the north. Some of these images are black and white. The architect didn't know us colorizing everything. This is looking towards what had been treehouse, and this is showing the student lounge. Here's a slightly closer shot. We're working with students to see what they'd like to see in that space, and they've been providing feedback. This is one of the graduate student bays. So we're thinking, it's much better functional furniture for them and even space for them to decompress a bit within their lounge. These are communities rather than isolated pockets. So it'll be great to actually have students together for collaboration. This is a shot from the front of the auditorium. Those are the types of seats we'd be getting. They're on a rail so that the electricity can be shared. The tablet arm swings down if you're just there for a lecture or a presentation. Front half of the room has about 80 seats. The back half of the room, probably another 80 or so, depending on furniture. Up above, you can see the windows looking to or from that second floor conference room. This is a view from the back of the room. One of the things we've kind of enjoyed in starting to select furniture is kind of agility. The students like to rearrange the furniture to their own liking. Sometimes these are tables facing forward for two. Instructor may tell the class to do some group work and come back in a few minutes. They can rearrange the furniture on a dime, which is kind of nice without having to bring in a move crew. The gallery space for landscape architecture, a place to actually be able to hang exhibits and keep them here. That second floor conference room looking into the auditorium, probably one of the most unique spaces in the building. A typical faculty office. On the right, you can just barely see the robust built-in bookcases, the large windows. The windows are being replaced. The new windows are absolutely fabulous. They're a rich dark green on the exterior, probably of color that was original to Marshall or close to it. That green was prevalent in the 30s. And then on the interior, they're wood windows. The cladding is on the exterior. So we have the opportunity to express them, in a different tone on the interior. This is a typical shared office, and the shared offices, because they don't have windows, have lots of borrowed light, side lights, etc., so that they're still engaged with what's going on and benefit from light from other places. These are what we call huddles. So these are in the middle of the second floor. They really belong to everyone. So each one probably seats 4 to 6. If students have a question and their professor wants to take them aside and explain something, it's an opportunity space. Students may find it's a great place for group work activities if they can't do it, in their apartment or can't find a place to reserve. Very transparent. You can see what folks are working on. You can actually write on glass. Which will be something new and exciting. A look down the corridor. So there's decompressed spaces, here and there so that you can carry on that conversation that started after class. This is the space between the two studios. So rather than burying a lounge within a studio, it really belongs to everyone, not necessarily just, those engaged in landscape architecture. And that's a view looking west. The open studio is to your right there along the north and the quad. This is one of the most exciting spaces where the trusses are exposed. The skylight is back. And again, for our upper class landscape architecture, this will be fabulous creative space. There's a view of the north studio looking over to the quad. So there's a lot of shared views rather than a view belonging to captive to a select few. And you can see how transparency works well, through the corridor. You can see what's going on in a studio as you walk by. This is the jury crit room up on the 4th floor. It feels much more bunker-like now, but with glass to the corridor, glass to the sky, it will be just absolutely spectacular space to showcase students' work, have presentations. They often will bring in a visiting lecturer over a lunch hour. This is the space where most of that will happen. And here's the view from Gateway again. So it becomes an easy climb up to the quad, something we've never had. And this is actually my last shot. I took this. I was probably not the first to go out there, but among the first. This is the 4th floor, west of the elevator, looking over the campus. So this is the kind of view that everyone gets, when either using the elevator or the stair to Marshall. So we really need to exploit opportunities like this. We have an exciting campus. This looks into Oakwood, over Yon, over Hendricks Field, toward the city, at the Dome. So this is all coming together beautifully. We've got probably a little bit more than a year to go. They're just a little bit past the halfway point. We're expecting they'll have this ready for the spring semester of 2023. Various levels are going to be complete ahead of that, but we can't really move in until it's all complete. We're starting to pick furniture, and finishes are largely already selected. So it's an exciting and transformative project. Can't wait to do the next one. So.
Thank you, Rex. That was amazing. I've been on campus. I've seen some of the things going on, but to see that presentation is really exciting for us. I'm sure it's extremely exciting for our students. It was nice to see how student-centric that design was and how they're taking advantage of every little nook and cranny it seems that they're uncovering. So that's really exciting. I can't wait until we can all take a walk through again. We'll have to have you back. Once everything's done, we'll do a virtual walkthrough with you, and you can explain everything again at that point in time. I did want to ask you one question, because I know this is something that a lot of our alumni remember about Marshall Hall, is the spiral staircase. I saw it in some of the layout designs, but is that still remaining part of the structure of the building?
Absolutely. It's one of the best features. It's got Tennessee marble treads, bronze capped handrails, light fixtures are being restored. So yes, it's absolutely staying. Matter of fact, it opens up at the bottom because of the way the code is now with a fully sprinklered building. We can open up the bottom so you don't have to seek it out. And before, folks would often walk by it, not realize it was a stair. It'll be opened up on other floors so you notice it and are probably more inclined to use it. So no, it stays. It's a great feature. So good question.
Well, and honestly, that was all the questions I had. I think you did such a phenomenal job covering all aspects of the renovation. I really appreciate you being with us today. And as I said, we'll definitely have you back for an update at a later time. And maybe we can show everybody some actual footage from inside the building, something to keep in mind for later. So I thank you very much for joining us, Rex. Again, my name is Debbie Cavanis. I'm the Alumni Director here at the college, and this has been ESF Connected. Thank you.
Thanks.